Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Tuesday, November 18, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. President Trump taking a bold step regarding the potential future of government-sponsored health care here in the U.S. Russia taking desperate measures as they look to boost their struggling economy and finance their nearly 4-year-long war with Ukraine. And a shocking new report reveals that China is responsible for providing trillions of dollars of loans in a concerted effort to infiltrate critical infrastructure projects in wealthy countries all over the planet. Also, the Trump administration makes a significant policy change that affects every American who receives SNAP benefits. And we share some rockin' good news as a legendary singer plans to make a triumphant return to the musical stage of Saturday Night Live. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with President Trump, who's now doubling down on his position against extending government-funded healthcare subsidies and offering up a bold alternative which could benefit millions of people right here in the U.S. 47 says he's fed up with what he calls big, fat insurance companies making trillions of dollars by ripping off the American public, and that moving forward, he'll only put his stamp of approval on any measure that makes healthcare payments directly to the American people themselves. He claims that by implementing this type of direct payment plan, Americans would be put in a much better position to both negotiate and purchase their own comprehensive health insurance coverage. In the meantime, he's also urging Congress to heed his message and telling them not to bother wasting their time and energy by working on any other type of plan. Additionally, Trump says that he's already spoken with a number of Democrats about his daring proposal and that many of them seem to be on board with his idea because right now, hey, we all know it, the current system, it's not panning out real well. He points out that while Obamacare premiums are skyrocketing, insurance companies are raking in the dough, making tons in profits, and putting nothing back into the pot. Meanwhile, Republicans claim there's widespread fraud in the Affordable Care Act and that both the private sector and the free market can do better, and they're considering a long list of ideas about how to improve our country's health care system. It's about time. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. We need to finally rid ourselves of the Affordable Care Act, which is clearly not affordable. Nobody cares about it, and the time to act is now. Obamacare was a bad idea right out of the gate, and clearly our federal government should not be in the health insurance industry. The Fed can certainly provide oversight to organizations that sell insurance policies, auto, motorcycle, boat, home, health, and more. But there's absolutely no reason for them to be an insurance retailer. Now, follow the money. If the Affordable Care Act was actually affordable, then why are Democrats fighting tooth and nail for soon-to-expire health care subsidies to be extended? They're fighting so hard to push their scam that they actually forced the U.S. government to board up the doors and lock up the windows for more than 6 weeks. What a tragedy. The president's plan to send money back to the people, needs some additional finessing, but anything would trump Obamacare. Now, for individuals and families who need to purchase health insurance, there are already plenty of insurance companies with a variety of plans, and they can do the job much more effectively and efficiently than the federal government. Hey, surely you have thoughts on today's top story, and tell us what you're thinking. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Producer Davey, what do you got for us?
Okay, Bill, we got Millie checking in with us today from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Love me some Wilmington, North Carolina. Millie, glad you're here. What do you got for us?
She says Obamacare is an abomination that costs an arm and a leg. Anything would be an improvement.
Well, I wouldn't call Obamacare an abomination. I would call Obamacare an abomination. There's a little bit of a difference there, but you're absolutely right. You are spot on. Also, in addition to existing companies which already sell insurance policies, Amazon.com, I've checked it out. They have some terrific low-cost healthcare options. Also, the same genius entrepreneurs who spend untold billions inventing and perfecting AI, well, they could most likely develop some kind of a program to provide quality health insurance at affordable prices to the entire country. Dave, am I on target with that AI? They can do AI, can't they do health insurance?
Yeah, it makes sense, Bill. I think you're on target with that one.
Makes perfect sense. All right, switch gears now and shift our focus to Russia and their growing struggle to afford the ongoing expense of their brutal war against Ukraine. Russian lawmakers taking aggressive steps to raise much-needed cash and approving a number of significant tax hikes as Moscow desperately seeks new ways to boost their fading economy and continue to fund their nearly 4-year-long war. In a series of new measures, the Russian parliament is hoping to raise billions of dollars for the Kremlin by increasing their tax rates at nearly every step of their country's entire supply chain, including to consumers. Also trying to jumpstart Russia's ailing economy by weighing a number of provocative proposals which would significantly raise taxes on things like booze, cigarettes, and smartphones. Sounds like a rock and roll song. According to the Kremlin, after a relatively short burst of growth due to military spending, Russia's economy now facing some very stiff headwinds and is on track for an extremely difficult year. Additionally, the country also suffering from terribly high interest rates as well as soaring inflation. Now, in the meantime, things aren't likely to get easier for Russia anytime soon. Republicans in the U.S. Senate, they're currently putting together the finishing touches on a new measure which would impose substantial tariffs on any country which does business with Moscow. And President Trump now says he's likely to approve that bill if it ever comes across his desk. It'll be there. Be patient, 47. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. As it turns out, being the owner-operator of a 4-year-long war with your next-door neighbor, it can be a mildly expensive endeavor. And that owner-operator, Vladimir Putin, appears to be running a bit low on rubles. This murderous dictator thug has done all he can to pad his economy with cash by selling oil to China, India, also Turkey, and others. But tariffs and sanctions, in time, they're going to put a crimp in the big oil lines, which means a hit in his revenues. And don't look now, but their economy, it's taken a dive. War ain't cheap, and now the Kremlin is looking elsewhere for additional revenue to not only prop up a sagging economy, but also to fund Putin's now legendary war machine. Because money doesn't simply grow on Russia's Siberian cedar trees, the dough will now come from businesses and John and Joan Q. Public, or in this case, John and Joan Q. Petrov. And he'll simply raise taxes. When taxes go up, people become restless, and if Putin's fellow countrymen don't want to fund this horribly expensive war, perhaps they'll fight back. On the other hand, because war, it ain't pretty, maybe they'll continue to simply look the other way and just get on with their lives. Tell us what you're thinking about Russia's faltering economy, their goofy way to somehow get rich quick, and the billions and billions they're wasting on their war with Ukraine. Catch us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to the email bag, lay it on me.
Okay, Bill, we got Samson checking in with us from Augusta, Maine.
Samson, as in Delilah. Samson, what's on your mind?
He says, clearly the Russian economy is hurting, but I don't believe this has anything to do with the war at all, and it's simply the natural cycle of business.
It has absolutely everything to do with the war. War, if you haven't gotten the memo, is pretty darn expensive. And speaking of memos, Russia did not get the memo. But clearly, you cannot tax a nation into prosperity, especially when your country is waging a years-long, entirely unnecessary war against a neighbor. He's simply going to tax himself out of a job and a country out of business. War is extremely expensive. This has everything to do with that war. Our return now from one troubling foreign adversary to yet another. An alarming new report revealing that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, has intentionally been lending trillions of dollars to highly sensitive industries throughout wealthy countries in the West, including right here in the U.S., in a secretive plot to advance China's national security aims. Well, it's no longer much of a secret. The report says that over the last couple of decades, China has become the world's largest overseas investor, giving the CCP the potential to dominate a variety of critical technologies and infrastructure projects and all over the planet. Also says that while some of those investments were made simply to generate healthy profits, a great deal of others were made in order to implement a deliberate mapped-out CCP strategy to eventually control a number of cutting-edge technologies, including things like EVs, semiconductors, and robotics. That's all big money. The report goes on to say that the CCP initially targeted those sectors back in 2015 before spending the last decade bringing their plan to fruition. Sounds like a James Bond movie. Davey, how many James Bond movies have they made?
Oh, Bill, there have been 27 James Bond movies.
Well, this one's going to be 28. Now, as an example, before the first Trump administration began tightening up our country's investment laws back in 2018, one Chinese organization bought up a small company which provided insurance policies to both the CIA and the FBI. Now, that deal virtually gave the CCP access to the personal details of many of our nation's top intelligence agents. Look at China as chaos and the U.S. as control, although we're losing control. According to the report, the U.S. is currently the top recipient of China's financing, receiving more than $200 billion for thousands of projects across the country, including energy pipelines, power transmission lines, and airport terminals. We're selling away the store. The report's author says that at first, wealthy nations in the West had no idea that Chinese investments in their countries were part of a larger strategy by the CCP, but that eventually they kind of figured out what was going on. Also says that moving forward, looking ahead, he expects the West to react swiftly by shifting gears and going on the offensive. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Sometimes feels like we're being outplayed, outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and when you're competing for global supremacy, never a good idea to be asleep at the wheel. Here's an example. How is it even remotely possible that a company which sells insurance policies to U.S. federal agents could be owned and operated by a company in China, and that company had ties to the country's communist regime? You got to wonder, where's the oversight? Who allowed this to happen? How long has it been going on? And when do we put a stop to it? It might be fun to point fingers at Wright USA. That's the American insurance company we're talking about. But they might argue that they played by the rules and did nothing wrong by selling their company. However, if you're like me, you might want to know just how many other Wright USAs there are out there or out here in the U.S. And whatever happened to businesses putting country ahead of profit? Outside of that, if you didn't already know, clearly China is the one to watch right now. Like Russia, they're looking to dominate. Russia by brawn, China by brains. They're investing all over the world. They're building out a formidable military-industrial complex at home, and they get high-tech like nobody else. And they'll stop at nothing to gain the advantage over everyone on the planet, and at any cost. Now, I can't imagine that I'm the only guy who's alarmed by China's growing dominance. And tell us what you're thinking. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, what is on the minds of America?
Okay, Bill, we have a Mason checking in with us from Columbus, Ohio.
Mason, state your business, sir.
He says this report says it all. For decades, the Chinese communist regime has been plotting our doom, and they're on the verge of gaining the upper hand.
Well, I wouldn't say they're on the verge of gaining the upper hand. I'd take it a step further and say they have gained the upper hand. Come on now. Look, China gets a lot of junk wrong, from human rights abuses to forced labor, from forced organ harvesting to mass surveillance, and a bunch more. In the end, however, China is a powerhouse, and they should right now be on everyone's radar. Now, some additional headlines we're keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And up first, in order to combat fraud, the Trump administration says they're going to require everyone who's currently participating in our nation's government-funded SNAP food assistance program to reapply if they want to continue receiving their much-needed benefits. Change things up and turn now to a pressing concern involving big tech and the CEO of AI giant Anthropic revealing that he's extremely uncomfortable with what he calls a few unelected elites making a number of critical decisions concerning the future of artificial intelligence, which has the potential to drastically change everyday life as we know it. A lot to take in. Also, some breaking developments out of the Middle East and the UN Security Council voting to endorse President Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza and backing an international force to provide stability in the battered enclave. Well, the U.S., Israel, and the Palestinian Authority all praising the results of the UN tally, with the terrorist group Hamas rejecting it outright. Yeah, we kind of saw that coming. Over to the world of business now, and a quick glance at a couple of stories which are raising eyebrows in the world of commerce, the markets, and more. Leading things off, the White House admitting that the U.S. job market is now showing a number of mixed signals and saying that it's quite possible the labor market is slowing down due to the advent of AI. Also, speaking of artificial intelligence, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is tossing his hat in the ring once more and backing a new multi-billion-dollar AI startup called Project Prometheus, and rival Elon Musk calling Bezos a copycat for following his lead and supporting the cutting-edge technology. Call that a case of the bickering billionaires. Now, some appetizing news. The restaurant chain Panera announcing plans to win back customers by reversing a bunch of their highly unpopular cost-cutting measures, and among the upcoming changes, improving the quality of their salads and increasing the size of their previously shrunk sandwiches. Look, quit raising prices and shrinking the portions. Folks don't dig that. Davey, do you dig that?
Absolutely not, Bill. I don't think anybody likes that.
Yeah, come on, give us a square deal. I think they call that shrinkflation. And now, quick gander at the lighter side of news, and we kick things off today by turning back time and sharing a breaking announcement concerning a legendary pop music giant. No, Engineer Jamie, not KC and the Sunshine Band, the other giant. For the first time in nearly 40 years, the one and only Cher is set to return next month as the featured musical guest on Saturday Night Live. She'll be appearing on the same program with guest host and Wicked star Ariana Grande. And no word yet on whether or not the two plan to sing I Got You, Babe. But that would be kind of magical. Now, look, I've been a fan of Cher for decades and decades. Good to see she'll be belting out the hits once again on SNL in just about a month. Not a big Saturday Night Live fan, but hey, if Cher is going to be there, then producer Davey and I will be watching and singing along in the key of magenta. And it's going to be a huge show. You haven't lived till you've heard producer Davey sing. Davey sings flat and sharp at the same time. It's just amazing. All right, stick with the music business and on to another legend. Rolling Stones guitarist Ronnie Wood is also a fine artist, celebrating his half a century with the greatest rock and roll band in the world by painting a series of portraits featuring his bandmates Mick and Keith. And even though he's no longer with us, drummer Charlie Watts as well. He says the collection is his attempt to share with the world both the spirit of the band as well as the energy of their live shows. Now, I know a great deal about this rock and or roll business, but as a guy who just adores fine art, I got to say that this Mr. Wood guy is the real deal. He's no Salvador Dali, but he paints every bit as good as he plays that accordion with his little skiffle band, the Running Stones. I just love that
hold it,
band.
Bill. What are you talking? First off, okay, Ronnie Wood is the lead guitarist for the Rolling Stones.
No accordion?
No accordion, guitarist, and the name of the band is the Rolling Stones, Bill, not the Running Stones or whatever. The Rolling Stones.
Running Stones, Rolling Stones, Gallstones. It's all the same to me. It's rock and roll. Give me a break. And now for something completely different, an Idaho man who's already broken more than 300 Guinness World Records can add another feather to his cap after riding his unicycle for at least 10 seconds while carrying 7 bowling balls. Producer Davey, I'm kind of at a loss. What do I do now? Do I congratulate him or something? A little help?
Yeah, Bill, congratulate him. That's quite a feat.
All right. Congratulations on riding half of a bicycle and being such a horrid bowler that you had to steal 7 bowling balls from the local Bowlerama and then ride down the street to break some goofy Guinness record. Congratulations, I guess. I guess he's kind of lucky he didn't crash and break his neck. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Tuesday edition of the Big News Roundup. But before we go, and as we do each and every day here on the program, we like to share with you a very notable quote. And these insightful words come to us today from the great Red Skelton, who said, "All men make mistakes, but married men, they find out about them sooner." Yeah, that's my dad told me that a long time ago as well. Skelton was a popular American entertainer who believed his life's work was to make people laugh. For decades, people all over the country, they enjoyed his act on vaudeville, radio, and TV. And personally, Davey, I enjoyed his work in that great movie, Shawshank Redemption. Just brilliant. Love that guy.
What are you talking about?
Red.
Red, the character Red in Shawshank Redemption was played by the actor Morgan Freeman.
Oh.
This is Red Skelton, one of the great comic minds of the 20th century.
Red Skelton, Red the character guy. Okay, it makes sense now. And now it is time for us to bust on out. But before we go, don't forget that News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. And simply all we need you to do is hit that little subscribe button right over there. And that way you never miss a single episode. Would it kill you to ask a friend, your neighbor, your relative, anybody you got, ask them to subscribe to the channel as well. And now it looks like our time, it's officially up. So have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another. And with that, Engineer Jamie, let's go ahead and dim those lights. Let's fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.